Hey folks, TornadoTwins here. Here's another tutorial. The goal of this tutorial is to show how to make the most emotional music possible for films and games with professional quality so that it can be placed in a film or a game. Now if you're a beginner, that's okay, you can follow along. If you don't have Ableton Live or use different software, you can still follow along. It's all fine. And if you don't feel that you have enough music theory under your belt, for example, you don't play the piano well enough, don't worry about that either. We're just going to show you a workflow that works for us. Now let's take a quick listen at the song we will be making before we start the tutorial. Here we go, enjoy. Well, I hope you liked it. We loved making it. So what we've done is I've saved every step in the process of making it so I can explain sort of the workflow and how it's different from other types of music. Obviously we have a dubstep background in case you've seen our other tutorials, and you know, a lot in orchestra kind of stuff is very different. So first thing what we do is, I'm not the best guy on piano. I'll outright admit it. I'm not a piano player. I play guitar and other things, but piano I'm not that great. So what I do is I go to Google and I type in most emotional chord progressions and I look at what other guys are saying about it, and they will generally give you chord progressions of great songs. So what's a chord progression? It's pretty much a chord, so two or notes or more is a chord that progresses from one chord to the other, and it's usually 4 or 8 of them that progress in a certain fashion. And then I look at those blogs and I kind of put the chord into the MIDI channel here. And if you don't know exactly how to play a piano chord, you just Google piano chords and then just play the notes in. It's pretty easy, and then see if it sounds great. So this chord progression is what it started off with, and it sounds like this. Now sometimes I try 4 or 5 chord progressions to find one that I can really make a melody out of. And there's a couple of things that I'm looking for. Are there melodies in my head going on while I'm listening to this? And second, how well does this flow if I repeat it over and over again? Is it still going to be interesting? So if that all passes the test, then I put some markers up in here that tell me what chords they are in case I need to quickly reference them later, which really comes in handy. And so let's go to the second one here, because as soon as the chord progression is in there, what we start looking for is we start trying to find melodies. What I would generally do is I go through the notes of the chord, and then I find some notes that are not in the chord that work well together. So if I move these notes down an octave, you can see that they overlap with the G chord, or the G note, because the G is in that chord, but the G sharp is not. However, if I listen to it, it sounded great together, and I took that risk. Now, as soon as this melody is made and I like it and I think it's gonna make me cry, because we're looking to make emotional songs here, and I don't cry a lot, so it has to take a lot, then I'll play it to somebody else that gives me honest feedback, and in my case that's my brother, and if he goes, okay, this is good or this is not good, then I continue on, because it doesn't make any sense to continue on something that is not great. Now notice also that there's some differences in rhythm here. You have this da 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 da. Now if I did the same structure here, you could da 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 da, you know, you get the same thing, and it sounds kind of mechanical. That's why I moved the last note over to make the da da. Let's listen to it when it sounds more mechanical, like so. Now, in that case, it really sounds like a child is playing the piano and just pushing buttons. But if you add that last little effect, then it sounds like a professional melody. And I just repeat the same thing over here on this side. But then before going to this side, add two little notes, you know, to make it all flow together. And so I was happy with this, and you know, this is one melody out of the same chords, but over the course of a song of 2 minutes and 50 seconds, which is normal for trailer music, there you'll have about 3 melodies that you change into off and on out of the same chord progressions. Okay, so let's continue on to the third here. And now we start adding some other type of instruments already. You get the idea. The one here is just fast violins. And the other one is plucked violins, which in Italian is pizzicato, which is the official name for, you know, plucked violins. Now in the end I ended up taking the staccatos out, because as you can hear, a short string sound is like, it has a little bit of an attack, so it goes, you know, instead of ta 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 ta, you know, and that makes it sound a little bit delayed in the rhythm. So the one way to solve that is by taking all these notes and moving them forward like I've done here, because usually they would need to be on the grid like so, and that sounds delayed. You hear that? It sounds a little messy. So you move them to the left a little bit to make them fit. Okay, but I ended up taking those out later anyways. If you wonder what instruments these are, I'm a big fan of the contact instruments that are made by 8DO, 8do.com, and they have some of the best violin packs in the market. And this one is called Adagietto, and the other one was called Adagietto as well, and you can choose from different packs. This one's pizzicato, and then they have marcato and all the other stuff, legato, which is long strings, those kind of things. Okay, more about that a little bit later. Let's go on to the next one, and I'll skip the middle here because it's more the same, and I go towards the end in a little bit. So here the melody is starting to take shape. Okay, so first off, I've muted the piano, so the piano chords are not playing anymore, so I can have enough room in my ears, you know, for the other instruments. One of them is this one is called Action Strings by You know, it's sold through Native Instruments, but made by Dynamedian guys that made the music for the Crisis games, and they really know how to score some really awesome music. And this pack allows you to make really fast instruments or fast notes. And you know, that adds a lot of energy to your track. Okay, so what I've done, I've pretty much taken those chords from the piano and given it to the fast strings. Then the one that I'm really excited about is the bowed strings, and this is also in the same Adagietto pack by ATO. And the bows here come up really slowly. Listen to this. Really nice stuff, because when you have a bow on a string, that's really what it sounds like. And most packs don't do that. They just give you those flimsy violin sounds, which I don't like, and this adds a lot of body to it. Let's see if I added them. No, nothing yet. Okay, so I'll cover that later. So, but anyways, these bowed strings, they take a long time to come up. So if I look at the original chord progressions here, you see that the D sharp note here is used in all first three chords. Then in the next three chords, the A sharp is used. And so what I like to look at in a chord progression is to see if there's notes that keep going for a long time, so I can use those bowed strings. And you know, then I take any notes that are not long and I remove them, so that only the bowed strings are using those long notes, and that sounds really beautiful. Okay, so that's a cool tip. So let's move on and add some more stuff. I started working on the secondary melody here a little bit as well, because sometimes you're just working on music, you walk away and you get a different melody in your head and you're like, wait, I need to add that, and that's where this is going. So I've pretty much moved everything over to the right, and I've kept this piece on the left, but I'm not touching this anymore because it has the notations of my chords. So I'm not going to use this from now on, and I'm just going to move things out of it towards the right to make the song. Otherwise you get stuck at 30 seconds at a song and you never really finish it. I don't know if you've ever had that before. So let's see what's happening here. We have the pianos playing shorter chords, and then we have the bowed string still, but then we have extra bows and a legato string, which is pretty much a long note of string working together to create a swelling melody. So here it is. And the rest you already know. So there's some interesting stuff going on. These bows here are of course these long notes that come up slowly, and I cut them in half. They stop right there, and then I go to the legato as if it's one note swelling into the next, and sounds like this. And then they work together. Now they don't really work together by default, so what I did was add them into the same group, this string group, and then send a lot of that sound into the reverb here, the send channel. And so the reverb kind of smears out the sound like a snail on the pavement, if you still remember our old dubstep tutorials, and makes it work together nicely. So this way it sounds like one string rather than two different strings, and it fakes your ears, it tricks your ears into thinking that there's a melody. Okay, so that's a nice little intro. Continuing on, adding more stuff. And okay, so here's something being added. Let's solo this. Now these are obviously cellos and basses, also the ATO Adagietto packs, and they're also bowed. But what you notice is they go from sort of medium low to a little bit lower, and then slowly upwards, and that sort of gives you tension as if it's coming closer to your ear, which I always like to do with sort of the bass instruments in orchestra. However, that also means that you can now have, as soon as it goes up, you can now use another instrument to go down, and so they kind of flip-flop each other. They crossfade like a DNA string, and I'll tell more about that later. But that really adds flow into your song rather than just being a stagnant blurb of music. Okay, so let's see what else is going on here. There's a choir being added. Now this choir is not my favorite choir in the world, but it really works well together with strings, so I find myself using it a lot. This is by East West Quantum Leap. I don't know what the QL stood for anymore, but it's EWQL, and it's the silver Symphonic Orchestra silver pack. It's an excellent pack. It has all kinds of trombones and French horns in there, and I really recommend it. The only problem with it is you have to use an iLock to use it, so you're carrying around a USB stick all the time, which in my mind is a bad customer experience. But still, they're good samples, so they're useful. Together, that adds a lot of body. And then here I've added some low hits. Now these low hits are made by the same company that made these fast strings, Dynamedian, which exists as boomlibrary.com, and boomlibrary.com has sound effects for games and music, and this pack is called cinematic hits, so they're used inside of trailers and stuff. I think it was used in the Hobbit trailer and a bunch of other cool movies, and it really adds a lot of body to your track, so I like using them as orchestral pieces rather than just as a trailer. So yeah, the piano here is a little bit obnoxious because I doubled it and used 2 octaves, but we'll change that a little bit later. Now let me skip a couple and go to number 11 here. I hope this has been useful so far. The most important piece is start with a good chord progression and then extrapolate notes out of that into different instruments. Okay, let's take a listen here. Now a couple of important things, really important things have happened here. a couple of instruments have been added, but it's not the instrument that have been added that makes a difference. It is what they're doing in in the frequency space. So first off, the piano here has the melody. Okay, and that's been coupled by some more legato strings. Now what I like about the legato strings of the ADO pack is if you overlap them, they kind of glide from one to the next. Let's take a listen to that. And that really gives you that sort of emotional feel as if you're watching a movie about the World War or whatever. But it only happens when you overlap it, so use it wisely, because using it too much makes it annoying. So I don't use it here to sort of end the melody. And there you go. Okay, so but then the legato strings go into the second piece, and it goes up an octave to emphasize that it's climbing. And then it went down an octave to sort of play against itself, and then it goes back up again and up one more to create that swelling effect towards the end where it switches to the next melody. And I think that's really important. Most of the time you make a melody and it's all in the same octave space. Grab some of them, move them down, move them up, and see what it does with the sound. It really plays tricks on your mind, and it's really beautiful. Now at the same time you can use other instruments that tumble down and up at the same time. So this piano goes up an octave here, and then here this instrument goes up an octave as well. Now the reason why these sort of staccato, the quick hits have been added is to play off the of the melody as well as the fast strings. So if I play this together with the fast strings, this really adds body to it by emphasizing it just a little bit more there towards the end. And then if you add in the melody, now we talked a little bit about switching octaves, but also switching instruments and letting those instruments fill those octaves that you're missing. And that's what the flute's doing here, in contrast with the strings. Well, it's pretty much the same octave, but I'll start changing that later up with clarinets and other type things. Now, those type of instruments, clarinets and woodwinds, are not my favorite instruments. I have to be quite honest. Especially a hobo or a clarinet sounds like an instrument that's been punched in the nose and just has trouble coming out of the mix. But it once you start replacing strings with other instruments, it sounds way more lush. And it was a friend of mine I listened to a track and said, dude, you're just trying to make the whole orchestra exist out of strings. You shouldn't do that. So that I listened and changed it up. So let's listen what's going on here. Now two things have been added here. One is this harpish sound. And the reason why that was added is because this violin is gliding from one note to another, and the glide takes a millisecond. So that means it's really nice, and it takes you on this journey, of glides, but at the same time it's late in the rhythm. So it sounds like it's off rhythm. So I add another instrument to it that is never late, like on harp, because it's a very short, plucked sound. And that way it sounds like the whole mix is in harmony again, rhythm-wise. So if you ever feel like your track is out of rhythm because of the strings, It's probably, because it is, all you have to do is add like a fast note instrument like a piano or a harp or something like that, very, very mildly on top of it to make it come back. Now, and the next addition here is these French horns. Now, if you take French horns and you take the volume down about half, it sounds almost like an organ. And I really like that effect because it fills up the sound very lushly, and so it kind of makes the melody float on like a on like a surface of noise. Which is not that easy to fake in dubstep, but in the orchestra you can add all kinds of soft instruments without distorting the frequencies. So that's a really good thing to do. So let's move on here towards one of the last ones, and to finalize it all up and talk a little bit about mastering and how to EQ instruments and how to put them in the stereo mix, because anything that is sound is either left or right stereo, and it's in the frequency space. It's either bass or it's highs, and you can't escape that, and you have to be wise with those. So let's take a look at what's going on with the instruments here. This instrument we've had from the beginning, the bows. Now what I've done is I've taken all the bass out, and pretty much any instrument that's not bass, I cut it off at about 150 Hertz. That way it does not conflict with the bass, and it makes for a very clean mix. If it is a bass instrument though, I still cut it off at about 30 Hertz, because below 30 Hertz the human ear cannot hear it anymore, but your speakers can. So if your speaker puts all kinds of effort into putting out sound waves that are around 30 Hertz, then it starts to mud up the rest of the mix, and you're wondering where the mud comes from because your ears cannot hear it. But that's a tiny little trick. So since these are low bows, I take some of the mids out as well to make room for the strings. I haven't EQ'd a lot of it really, especially the 8DO packs, because they sound so beautiful. Then the piano I take a lot of low out as well. Then here we have a clarinet that's going to take over some of the melody of the other instruments. So the legato strings here are pretty much gone, because there were just too much strings in this song, and the clarinet's taking it on. Now by itself, like I've said earlier, I really don't like the sound of a clarinet. Because it sounds like an instrument that was kind of punched in the face. But this is an 8DO pack, so it's once again very high quality, and as you may have heard, some of the breathing and the blowing of the original player has been left in the recording, which makes it for really natural sounding instrument. But if I play this back in the whole mix, and it's laying on top of a bed of strings and horns, it's really not that annoying anymore. It's actually quite beautiful. Now notice how it's playing with the octaves again. It goes up. So if there's any golden tip in in the flow of a song, I would say don't keep an instrument in one and the same octave for too long. Unless they're very soft horns. So then the melody goes on, and there's an end melody here that was added at the end. So one last thing that I haven't pointed out much yet is the use of dynamics, and each pack that is good. So each instrument comes with a dynamics knob or an expression knob, and you can move those around so that the person that is playing the instrument in your song, if you will, is using more or less volume. So you know, you have forte, which is all the way up, high, or piano or pianissimo, you know, which is softer. But you can literally draw that in a curve. So if I took these bows and did not have this curve, then it would have sounded like this. Let me take this up for you. And all kinds of bleeds together, and it's pretty awful. So I use it as softly and as gentle as possible. You know, then work it into the rest of the song. So use your dynamics very, very wisely. And as you can see further on the song, I'm not using this little mountainy thingies anymore, these swells, but I'm actually, you know, going with the melody of the song. Now the reason why there's a cut in the middle is because, you know, there's a hit there, like this low hit. So I didn't want to take any frequency space out of that hit, because it's awesome because it's bass. And so this, you know, pretty much sums up how to mix some of the orchestra. One last tip is, if you take some of the instruments, move some of them more towards the left or the right, and you can Google how people or how orchestrators put people in the orchestra. Sometimes they put the violins on the right, sometimes they put other instruments on the left, and you can do the same thing as if you're mixing a real orchestra, and that really adds all kinds of dynamics. So I hope that helps. I hope you like this tutorial, and let us know in the comments if it was helpful. Thanks so much. Have a good one. Bye.